Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, Syria, a nation torn apart. Insurgents capture whole cities as the Syrian government, Russia, and Iran strike back hard. Plus, elusive ceasefire. Hezbollah violations result in IDF strikes on terror sites. Analysis on Syria and the International Criminal Court from Middle East experts Jonathan Spire and Hananya Naftali. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. This ceasefire with Hezbollah could mean the time is right for Hamas to cut a peace deal. President Biden's national security advisor says Israel and the terror group are back to negotiating. Meanwhile, Israel is closely watching its other northern neighbor after Islamic rebels captured Syria's second largest city. Within the past few days, Islamist rebel forces launched a major offensive against the Syrian regime and now control the second largest city, Aleppo.
This is unprecedented for the rebellion. The rebellion never held all of Aleppo, and it was expelled from all of Aleppo because it held the eastern part of the city for a while in 2016.
Over the weekend, the rebel forces continued their advance further south. Jonathan Spire is a Syrian expert with the Middle East Forum.
This must surely be a very major blow both to the Assad regime and indeed, I would say, to the larger regional alliance of which the Assad regime forms a part, namely that regional alliance headed by Islamic Republic of Iran.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Syrian situation.
We are constantly following what is happening in Syria. We are determined to defend the interests of the State of Israel and to protect the achievements of the war.
As of now, I would say there are not major implications for Israel because all of this, of course, is taking place in northwest Syria, which is an appreciable amount of distance away from the Golan Heights and Syria's border with Israel.
In Lebanon, a somewhat shaky ceasefire is holding. With Hamas's strongest ally, Hezbollah, out of the war for now, Israel is putting pressure on the terror group to make a peace deal in Gaza.
One of their main partners in crime here, Hezbollah, has now cut a ceasefire deal, and they thought that Hezbollah would be with them till the end.
President Biden's national security advisor says Hamas, Israel, and intermediaries are all negotiating again.
Our hope is that we can generate a ceasefire and hostage deal.
On Monday, the IDF announced the death of Israeli-American Omer Nutra, a New York native taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th. Nutra's death follows the emotional propaganda video released by Hamas over the weekend of Israeli-American hostage Idan Alexander, who pleaded directly with President-elect Donald Trump.
Use your influence and the full power of the United States to negotiate for our freedom. Every day here feels like an eternity, and the pain from inside grows from day to day.
At a rally to free the hostages, Idan's mother told the crowd she spoke with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
He reassured me and promised that now, after reaching an arrangement in Lebanon, conditions are right to free you all and bring you home.
Meanwhile, the Syrian Christians in Aleppo worry they're in grave danger because of the Islamist rebels now in control.
When we've seen them take over areas in the past where Christians live, Christians have been treated badly, up to and including forced conversions to Islam and other acts of that nature.
Nearly 1 week after the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, the IDF is firing back at violations by the terror group. President Trump is also weighing in on the plight of Israeli-American hostages held by Hamas. Take a look. The incoming president delivered a strong message to Hamas, demanding the release of the hostages in Gaza by the time he takes office. Trump wrote on social media, "If the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity." Trump's statement comes just days after an emotional appeal by Israeli-American Idan Alexander on a Hamas propaganda video, and the announcement that Hamas murdered another Israeli-American hostage, Omer Nutra, after Hamas took him captive when his tank was overrun on October 7th. President Biden also responded to the news, releasing a statement that read in part, Less than a month ago, Omer's mother and father joined me at the White House to share the pain they've endured as they prayed for the safe return of their son, pain no parent should ever know. House Speaker Mike Johnson posted, "Please join us in praying for the Nutra family as we continue to seek justice against Hamas and the return of Omer's body." On Israel's northern border, the ceasefire is holding, despite Hezbollah firing mortar shells into a disputed site on the Israeli-Lebanese border. Israel responded with military strikes. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar said Hezbollah forces operating south of the Litani River violates the ceasefire.
They must move north immediately. I want to emphasize, Israel is committed to the successful implementation of the ceasefire, but we will not accept a return to the situation as it stood on October 6, 2023. If violations occur, Israel will enforce.
In Syria, Islamist radicals strengthen their grip on Aleppo, Syria's second-largest city. Christians inside the city are terrified. One couple telling CBN News they fear for their lives and possible massacres.
And so now we have what's called Hayat Tel al-Sham, a terrorist group that is known as being jihadists who follow Sharia law, have just taken over Aleppo. And while they've announced that they're not targeting Christians or any religious minorities right now, there's much fear because the way they've governed Idlib, where they currently control, they've been using Sharia law there.
Nadine Ma'enza, the president of the International Religious Freedom Secretariat, tells CBN News it's vital for Christians to pray and speak out.
I think this is a time for the church to come together and think about how we can support those who are suffering. So many good organizations doing work for those who are fleeing to provide support. So many ways we can tell the stories that we're reading about, hearing about. So, you know, we're supposed to remember our brothers and sisters in chains. And this is one of those times where we can remember those who are suffering and pray for them and do what we can to support them.
Jonathan Spires' expertise on Syria comes from his many trips and reporting from in-country. He's also the director of research at the Middle East Forum, a fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, and a columnist for the Jerusalem Post. We asked him for his thoughts about the latest on the insurgency in northwest Syria. Jonathan Spires with Middle East Forum, thanks for joining us. What's going on in Syria right now not only has some of these jihadi groups, but also some of the major players in the region, Turkey, Iran, Russia. And how do you see all this geopolitical dynamic happening inside Syria? Yeah, first of all, it's really important to remember that this offensive by HTS, by the Sunni Islamist organization HTS, and the SNA, Syrian National Army, could not possibly have taken place were it not for the permission, tacit or otherwise, of Turkey. The area of control of the rebellion in the northwest of the country from which this offensive has erupted is guaranteed by the Turkish army. The Turkish army has military positions around the area in question. So there's no way these guys could have attempted this without Turkish permission. The Turks clearly are keen to sort of advance their position against what they regard, I think correctly, as a weakened Iran/Russian alliance. Weakened because every component of that alliance is very busy elsewhere. The Lebanese Hezbollah organization, the key kind of enforcers on the ground of that alliance, are hurting badly as a result of the effective sort of decimation of much of their ranks by Israel over the last couple of months. The Russians are very busy in Ukraine, and they're facing a key strategic challenge there of advancing as much as they can, you know, in the months ahead prior to Donald Trump, you know, taking up the presidency of the United States. And the Iranians themselves, of course, have been engaged in duels with Israel on 2 occasions, you know, direct missile confrontations with Israel on 2 occasions over the last, since the spring, since April. So all the components are busy or damaged, which means I think that the Turks thought, okay, it's a good time for us to sort of push our interests forward, to take some more ground, to push back our rivals in the Syrian context. And that's precisely what they're in the middle of doing. The Russians very clearly are keen, and the Iranians are keen to hit back. We're already seeing Russian air power committed to the skies over Idlib and Aleppo, with the usual inimitable results
of the application of Russian air power, namely widespread destruction of property and civilian lives, the Iranians and the regime itself are probably going to try a counteroffensive quite soon. So yeah, geopolitics is the name of the game in all this. It's all about the weakening of the Iran-led alliance and an attempt, I think, by the Turks to profit from the weakening of that alliance.
When you talk to a Western audience that looks at what's happening there, which seems very confusing, what are the main points you need to make to them? I
mean, the main point, again, is simply to say that the Assad regime is a fully paid up member of the Iran-led regional alliance. Syria constitutes key strategic real estate for the Iranians because it's there between Iraq, of course, to the east, Lebanon and Israel, and the Mediterranean Sea to the west. So it's a link in the chain that the Iranians want to maintain all the way from Iran itself to the Mediterranean Sea and to the borders with Israel. And that's why they're going to be so keen to try and push back this offensive. And from a Turkish point of view, the Turks, of course, support Sunni Islamist organizations everywhere as their instrument throughout the region. They're doing that also in the Syrian context. And right now, I think in a kind of opportunistic way, but a smart way, they and their allies have seen that, have noticed that the rival alliance, in a sense, in Syria is weakened, and they've therefore decided to try to push forward.
Of course, you have Israel right on the border of all this. What are the implications for the Jewish state?
I mean, Israel, in a certain sense, you know, Menachem Begin famously, the late Menachem Begin, when he was asked about who should Israel support in the Iran-Iraq war, and Begin said, we wish great success to both sides. And, you know, there's a sense of logic in that as well, in the sense that, of course, the Iran-led regional alliance is Israel's main enemy. But at the same time, there's no love lost, if I can put it that way, between, you know, a group of Sunni jihadis like HTS with Islamist Turkey behind them and Israel. You know, these organizations, of course, and were strong supporters of Hamas, for example. So in a certain sense, from an Israeli point of view, if these two forces wish to kind of bleed each other in Aleppo and Idlib provinces, in these remote provinces of northwest Syria, that's not necessarily a bad thing for Israel. Israel, I think, would not want to see either of them entirely win. A victory for the Iran-led regional alliance, of course, is not good from an Israeli point of view. But if we can imagine the birth of a new, angry, Sunni jihadi Syria, backed up by Turkey, probably aligning itself with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, that wouldn't be good either. So from a certain point of view, Israel, I think, will be probably quite content to sit back and watch these two enemy forces in a certain way go at it against one another up there in northwest Syria.
Well, Jonathan Spire, thanks for bringing some clarity and to a very complicated situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. We're here in our studio with Hananya Naftali. Hananya, you do such great stuff on X. First of all, tell us the platforms that people can find you.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I do Israel advocacy, fighting the lies on social media. The media, it's a big and important. It plays an important role in our society.
It's one of the main front lines of the battle over Israel.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can find me on X, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I believe in being with the truth wherever it's possible.
You're on all these platforms. You know, we're in the shadow of the decision by the ICC to issue arrest warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Tell us your thoughts about that, your reaction.
Well, I think that that's an attack not just on the Prime Minister or the former Defense Minister, but rather an attack on every Israeli civilian. You know, because those, by the way, that do not have the truth, those that lie, they attack the truth. And at the end of the day, what Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing, fighting for dealing with a seven multi-front war, at the end of the day, he's going to answer to the people of Israel and to history, not to hypocrites. So I'm asking, you know, as a citizen of planet Earth, where were they when Christians were butchered in Nigeria? Why did they turn a blind eye when Arabs were massacred by other Arabs in Syria, in Lebanon? Where were they? So all of a sudden, when Israel is defending itself and fighting for its survival, then they find it comfortable to attack us. The one democracy in the Middle East, it's shameful. Instead of attacking the one democracy in the Middle East and siding with terrorists, because, by the way, it is Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran that congratulated these are arrest warrants. And they said that they're fantastic. So when you see evil celebrating those decisions, that's how you know that it's evil as well.
Yeah, yeah. And they accused the Prime Minister and the former Defense Minister of starvation and committing war crimes, even while Israel has been sending in, I think, 1.1 million tons of food to the people of Gaza and trying to protect them in the midst of Hamas embedding themselves in the population.
It's preposterous. I think that the number stands at around 800 tons of aid that Israel channeled through its border crossings into the Gaza Strip. I served in the Israel Defense Forces. I served in the Armored Corps, in the tanks, and later as a combat medic. We were never instructed to use means of starvation or to use violence against the people of Gaza or Palestinian people in Judea and Samaria. On the exactly the opposite, I saved with my hands Palestinian civilians and Syrians as a combat medic in the Israel Defense Forces. I saved them. So how can they come to us, the people that uphold the highest standards of human rights, also in the army, and accuse us of such things? I saw with my own eyes when I visited the border crossing, Kerem Shalom, how trucks filled with humanitarian aid are crossing into the Gaza Strip. And Chris, you and the audience, they have seen multiple videos of Hamas stealing this aid, and also a lot of trucks outside the border crossing waiting for the UN organizations to take them and distribute them to the people of Gaza. I've not seen an army in the world that spends so much energy into helping the other side. But that's really the point, that we don't see the Palestinian people as the enemy of Israel. It's Hamas, it's the Palestinian leadership. At the end of the day, I'm sure that there are people on the other side that just want to live their lives, but also we cannot allow people that want to slaughter us to get away with it. So bottom line, we are not going to apologize for defending ourselves. And what they're doing to Prime Minister Netanyahu and to former Defense Minister Gallant, this is a reminder from dark chapters in history, like the Dreyfus affair.
Yeah.
And I think they're adding yet again to this dark chapter in anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Singling out the Jewish state, that we need our friends today more than ever. And when you come and attack us, at the end of the day, as someone who believes in God, I think that they're going to answer to God.
Yeah. Well, Hananya Naftali, thanks for your first-hand perspective.
Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm here with Paul Strand, one of our Middle East correspondents in our studio. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks.
So much shifting sands in the Middle East. Yeah. You have northwest Syria, you have Hezbollah, Hamas, the hostages, and the ICC as well. How would you look at this geopolitically from a really major, like a 30,000-foot view?
Yeah, what's interesting is to think that there was Israel just trying to wipe out Hezbollah, just trying to solve its own problem. And by wiping out most of Hezbollah, all of a sudden right after that, Turkey backs a bunch of these insurgents in Syria and goes after Syria, it seems like. And so you have to wonder, why did it do it right then? And I think that Iran, which was the big threat in this region, has been so weakened, both by Israel hitting it real hard the last time on October 26th, wiping out its air defenses basically, and I think that Iran's been so weakened that Turkey suddenly sees a chance here, and so we could see a big global realignment going on here. And what we had was Israel was really threatened by Iran and all those Shiite terrorists, and now could it be Turkey and all these Sunni terrorists? So it's not like this is a sudden relief for Israel, and that we see that if let's say the Islamic regime falls, we'll get a world of every country will sign the Abraham Accords and we'll have wonderful peace. Now maybe are we going to get the Shiite terror replaced with the Sunni terror? And is Turkey basically looking at the long picture and saying, Erdogan there saying, I want the Ottoman Empire back, and here's my chance. It's a time to strike right now. So what's fun about it is, not fun because there's a lot of tragedy going on in Syria, but what's interesting is Israel, what do they do? Whose side do they take? Either one who wins, if there's a clear winner, is going to come after Israel anyway, so that's not good. But what might happen is that they will really hurt each other. And we saw this a lot in the Bible, where there'd be all these enemies coming at Israel, and all of a sudden they'd all fight each other and wipe each other out, and there'd be Israel clean and free. And so I'm looking at this and saying, what's God doing in the middle of Turkey and Iran and Syria and the Russians all saying, what are we doing, as if they're in control? Who knows? Maybe God's up to something in the big picture.
The late Menachem Begum, I think Jonathan Spire said in his interview when he was asked about who he wants in the Iran-Iraq war, and he says, I wish them both success. So Israel's enemies fighting themselves. Some people are thinking even prophetically, you have all these major players, Russia, Turkey, Iran, and Syria, and could this be a prelude to things prophetically like Ezekiel 38, 39?
Exactly. But what's interesting is that eventually, even if these guys are all killing each other now, someday they're supposed to all get together and come against Israel. So
that's right.
Who knows? It seems like, it doesn't seem to me like we're right at the edge of the end of history.
Correct.
Because I still see that a whole lot of things have to happen to line the nations up all against Israel like we expect it to be. But it sure is an interesting time to see right at this moment all the shifting sands, because it seems like Israel, by really knocking down Hezbollah hard and hitting Iran hard, has maybe changed the whole calculus of the region.
Yeah. One other thing we're seeing is the Trump effect. And he weighs in on the hostages, and he says that, you know, there's hell to pay if these hostages aren't released by January 20th next month, when he takes the oath of office, reminiscent of what happened with President Reagan back in 1980, before he took office in 1981, after winning the election against Jimmy Carter, and warning Iran, you better let these hostages go before I take office.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting to see how much he's matured over 8 years, President Trump, in the fact that when he came into office, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to govern, really. And here we see him now governing, you know, 50...
And he's not even in office yet.
More than 50 days away from taking power. And in a way, he's already taken power. And, you know, this comes after that one hostage pleaded with him to do what he could. And he comes out and just says, let them all go now or else. And I loved his last sentence where he says, those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. And then all caps, release the hostages now.
Yeah.
How does this play? You who have lived here for so long, how does a statement like that play in the Middle East?
Well, there's a sense, there's a saying, the strong horse. People follow the strong horse, made famous by actually Osama bin Laden. And strength matters here in the Middle East, and I think they respect that kind of statement by President Trump. And I want to finally end on, Paula, just the people need to know about these Christians in Aleppo, how important it is to pray for them, support them, speak out for them, because they really are in deep peril.
Yeah, and, well, do you want to pray? I'll start.
Sure.
Do you want to finish it off? Okay, dear Lord, we do look to these people, our brothers and sisters, and you say that we're supposed to be concerned about them. We are concerned about them, and we realize these really are perilous times. Suddenly, terrorists who have killed them in the past are right back, right on their porches. So we would ask God that you would guard them, you'd protect them, that they would find their refuge in you.
Yeah. Paul, thanks for praying, and thanks for giving us some a wonderful analysis about what's happening, this kind of macro 30,000-foot view of what's happening in the Middle East.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, okay. And so thank you, too. And, well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and CBN apps. For all of us here in the Jerusalem Bureau, I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.